Martin Scorsese's The Departed stands as a masterpiece in the realm of crime thrillers, combining a stellar cast, intricate storytelling, and a gritty atmosphere that keeps viewers on the edge of their seats from start to finish. The film's plot revolves around the intertwined lives of two men on opposite sides of the law, Colin Sullivan, a cunning mole within the Massachusetts State Police, and Billy Costigan, an undercover cop infiltrating the notorious Irish mob led by Frank Costello. As the tension escalates, both men find themselves caught in a dangerous cat-and-mouse game, where loyalties blur, and the line between good and evil becomes increasingly indistinct. Mobster Frank Costello, an Irish-American, says in a voiceover that he wants to create his environment rather than being a product of it. A grainy historical film shows violent riots that took place in Boston in former times. The unrepentant racist, proudly Irish Costello, says that what irritates him about African Americans is their inability to accept that they will not be given anything. According to Costello, you must take what you want by all means necessary. In a little convenience store, Costello approaches the proprietor, who is obviously scared by Costello, and demands protection money. He is advised by Costello to have more money the next time. Behind the counter, the shop owner's young teenage daughter is asked by Costello if her period has arrived yet. His casual demeanor makes him seem even more menacing. The daughter responds to the powerful Costello's inquiry because she feels both driven and offended by him. The proprietor of the shop displays no emotion. Young Colin Sullivan, a young child, observes Costello's relationship with the shop owner. He is noticed by Costello, who inquires about his parentage. Then, he presses some coins into the youngster's hand after instructing the store owner to give the boy 2 full bags of groceries. He reminds the youngster that when he becomes older, Costello will give him more money. As Sullivan reaches adulthood, Costello mentors him and helps him land a position as a police officer so he can keep Costello up to date. Following his graduation from the police academy, Sullivan is hired by the Massachusetts State Police. He is admitted to Ellerby's Special Investigations Unit, which specializes in investigating organized crime. Costello is the unit's main objective. Sullivan receives a kind greeting from Staff Sergeant Dignam and Captain Queenan upon joining the state police. Billy Costigan is a student at the police academy, and comes from a large extended family with strong ties to organized crime. Before he graduates, Queenan and Dignam call him into a meeting where they humiliate, intimidate, and verbally abuse him. Because he is too intelligent to be a police officer, and because his family has connections to crime, they put pressure on him to resign as an officer. When Costigan refuses to participate in their hazing, they switch tactics and offer him a position as a police officer, but only if he will drop out of the academy, spend a significant amount of time in jail on a false assault charge, and enter Costello's group. The only people who will be aware that Costigan is undercover are Queenan and Dignam. When he completes the task, they guarantee him a bonus. In order to finance a narcotics trade, Costigan approaches his cousin after being released from prison. At the neighborhood tavern where Costigan and his cousin meet Mr. French, Costigan orders a cranberry juice. The patron seated next to him at the bar inquires about Costigan's period. Mr. French stops Costigan after he throws a beer mug over the man's head. Costigan is fortunate that the man in the bar is not one of the men Mr. French warns him not to beat up. While eating at the counter of a store similar to the one where Sullivan and Costello first met, Costigan confronts 2 Providence-based Italian mobsters who are attempting to extort protection money from the store owner. He severely beats the 2 men, striking one of them so hard that his hand is broken. Once Costigan is informed of his activities, Costello calls him into a meeting. He volunteers to defend Costigan from the mafia, who he claims will kill Costigan after returning with reinforcements. He calls Costigan into a back room and orders Mr. French, a more experienced member of Costello's team, to search Costigan for wires or weapons. In an effort to convince Costigan to confess to being a cop, Mr. French breaks Costigan's cast open, and Costello hits Costigan's fractured hand with a shoe. Despite taking their pounding, Costigan is recognized by Costello as a real thief. The credibility of Sullivan and Costigan grows throughout their respective organizations. Sullivan goes to the crime scene where the 2 Providence Mafia guys are discovered. After speaking with Costello, Sullivan receives instructions to steer the investigators away from Costello. Madeline Madden, a psychiatrist, and Sullivan start dating. She is also seen by Costigan, but only as a client, as required by the rules of his probation. He starts to feel drawn to her as well. Sullivan informs Costello of the police operation during a deal to sell stolen missile guidance microchips to Chinese government agents, and everyone avoids police suspicion by boarding boats waiting at the back of the warehouse. Sullivan and Costigan both realize there is a mole in the other's group, however, it is impossible to identify who it is. Dignam encourages Costigan to provide evidence so they can find the mole after he threatens to leave during their conversation. Costigan, who is very upset, concedes. With Madden, who intends to live with Sullivan, he has coffee. Sullivan is instructed by Costello to identify the rat in his group. Sullivan requests the social security numbers and other kinds of identification from his crew members so he can locate them. As Costigan looks for the informant, a member of Costello's crew reveals to him that Costello is actually an FBI informant, which explains why federal prosecutors have continually failed to charge and detain Costello. Late one night, Costigan pays Queenan a visit at his house and informs him that Costello is an FBI informant. Mr. French gathers everyone's ID and social security numbers. On the package containing their personal information, Fitzgibbons had spelled citizens incorrectly. Costigan fixes it before departing. Madden is completing her move out of her apartment when he stops by to see her. She informs him that she will be residing with Sullivan. They converse before having sex. Ellerby assigns Sullivan to lead the search for the Special Investigations Unit mole, noting his immaculate record. Costigan follows Costello to a pornographic theater where he witnesses Costello meeting and handing a mysterious man the envelope containing the personal data of Costello's crew members. Neither man discovers the other's identity as Costigan pursues Sullivan through Chinatown and out the theater's emergency exit. To follow Queenan to a meeting with Costigan, Sullivan instructs Costello. Prior to Queenan being thrown from the roof by Costello's men and landing at Costigan's feet, Costigan escapes. Costigan joins Costello's group as they depart, acting as though he has just arrived to take part in the assassination. Delahunt has been fatally injured. Delahunt identifies Costigan as the mole at their pub, but he passes away before he can inform anybody else. Delahunt, a crew member, was an undercover cop, according to a news story. Dignam is consequently obliged to retire from the police department. Sullivan calls Costigan on Queenan's phone but is unable to convince him to give up his job as a mole. From Queenan's diary, Sullivan discovers that Costello worked as a Federal Bureau of Investigation informant. He is concerned that his role as a Costello mole may be discovered. The police track Costello with Costigan's assistance to a cocaine pickup, where a firefight breaks out between his gang and the police, killing the majority of Costello's crew. When Costello is confronted by Sullivan, he confesses to being a sporadic FBI informant. He is shot many times by Sullivan. The following day, the entire police congratulates Sullivan for killing Costello. Costigan visits him in good faith with the intention of recovering his civilian identity and receiving back pay. He informs Sullivan that he plans to return to the workforce. When Costigan spots the envelope from Costello on Sullivan's desk, Sullivan gets up to check Costigan's personnel file. Costigan understands Sullivan is Costello's spy at last. When Sullivan gets back to his workstation, he understands that Costigan has discovered his true identity and deletes Costigan's employment information from the police database. Madeline informs Sullivan of her pregnancy but withholds the identity of the father. A few days later, a parcel from Costigan marked to Sullivan arrives in the mail for her. When she opens it, a CD of Costello's recorded chats with Sullivan is inside. She is listening as Sullivan enters and makes an unsuccessful attempt to allay her concerns. He speaks with Costigan, who informs him that Costello tape-recorded all of his conversations with Sullivan. The recordings were left by Costello with his lawyer, who then gave them to Costigan. Sullivan will be blamed if Costigan doesn't get his civilian identity back. On the roof of the same structure where Queenan was killed, they decide to meet. Sullivan is handcuffed by Costigan after being caught off guard when they first meet. Officer Brown also makes an unannounced appearance on the roof, as Costigan had planned. Brown pulls a gun on Costigan after being alarmed to see Sullivan in handcuffs and being held at gunpoint by the man. Costigan reveals that Sullivan is the mole in order to justify his conduct. Brown is questioned by Costigan as to why Dignam did not join him, but he remains silent. Brown follows Sullivan and Costigan up the stairs to the elevator. Officer Berrigan shoots Costigan once the doors of the elevator open on the ground floor. When Brown shows up, Berrigan also ends his life. Berrigan informs Sullivan that Costello was planning to turn both of his moles over to the FBI, and that he had more than one mole in the police. Sullivan shoots Berrigan in the head as soon as he turns for a brief second. In order to protect himself, Sullivan makes up a tale at police headquarters, naming Berrigan the mole and recommending Costigan for the Medal of Merit. Sullivan and Madeline are present for Costigan's funeral, standing by the grave. She ignores Sullivan's attempts to speak with her. Dignam greets Sullivan as he enters his apartment, and shoots and kills him. In conclusion, The Departed is a gripping and intense thriller that showcases Scorsese's directorial prowess and the talents of its remarkable ensemble cast. The intricate plot, morally ambiguous characters, and nail-biting suspense make it a timeless addition to the crime genre. With its electrifying performances, captivating storytelling, and thought-provoking themes, The Departed solidifies its place as a modern classic that continues to resonate with audiences worldwide. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching our video. We hope you enjoyed the content and found it valuable. If you did, we kindly ask you to consider subscribing to our channel. By subscribing, you'll become part of our community, gaining access to more exciting videos, informative content, and engaging discussions. It's the best way to stay updated with all our latest releases and be the first to know when we publish something new. Subscribing to our channel is absolutely free, and it helps us tremendously in reaching a wider audience and producing even better content for you. Plus, it shows us that you appreciate what we do, and that means the world to us.